Everyone saw the coffee spill. Nobody noticed who she really was. The sentence would spread through the company hours later, but at 8:23 that morning, all anyone saw was a young black woman standing in the center of a crowded corporate lobby with coffee running down the front of her light gray blazer. The lobby of Carter Technologies was already alive with activity. Employees crossed the polished marble floor carrying laptops, coffee cups, and meeting notes. Large glass walls flooded the space with sunlight. The company logo stretched across a towering stone feature wall behind the reception desk. It was the kind of headquarters people photographed when they visited, the kind of building that represented success. Jasmine Carter stood near the security gate holding a small notebook and a visitor badge clipped to her jacket. To anyone looking quickly, she appeared to be exactly what everyone assumed she was. A new intern, a temporary employee, someone trying to stay out of the way. She had arrived early and spent the morning quietly observing, watching how employees greeted one another, watching who thanked receptionists and who ignored them, watching how managers spoke to junior staff. Years of leadership had taught her that culture revealed itself in ordinary moments, not in speeches, not in annual reports, in small interactions that happened when nobody believed they were being evaluated. Across the lobby, elevator doors opened and a group of executives stepped out. At the center walked Ethan Reynolds, Senior Operations Director. Employees immediately moved aside as he crossed the floor. Some nodded respectfully. Others greeted him with nervous smiles. Ethan barely looked up from the messages on his phone. Confidence surrounded him like a tailored suit. He walked quickly, expecting the world to adjust around his schedule. Jasmine noticed him immediately. She had reviewed leadership reports before arriving. She knew his reputation. Strong numbers, strong influence, strong personality. The kind of executive many companies celebrated. The kind of executive few people challenged. As Ethan approached the security gate, Jasmine stepped slightly aside to allow him room to pass. At that exact moment, someone called his name from behind. Ethan turned abruptly while carrying a large cup of coffee. The motion happened in less than a second. The cup tilted. Coffee splashed forward. A dark wave spread across Jasmine's blazer, blouse, and notebook. Gasps echoed through the lobby. Several employees stopped walking. Conversations ended instantly. Jasmine looked down at the stains spreading across the front of her jacket. Warm drops landed on the polished floor. For a brief moment, complete silence settled over the lobby. Ethan glanced at the coffee on her clothes. Then he looked at her visitor badge. His expression changed, not to concern, to annoyance, as though the inconvenience belonged to him. "You should pay more attention to where you are standing," he said before checking his watch. The words hung in the air. Employees nearby exchanged uncomfortable looks. A receptionist stared in disbelief. Nobody spoke. Nobody stepped forward. Jasmine slowly lifted her eyes toward Ethan. There was no anger in her expression. No embarrassment. Only quiet observation. She pulled a napkin from her bag and calmly wiped a few drops from her notebook. Ethan had already begun walking away. Within seconds, he disappeared toward the executive elevators without offering an apology. The lobby gradually returned to motion. Conversations resumed. Phones rang. Employees continued toward meetings. Yet something felt different now. Several people glanced toward Jasmine before quickly looking away. The young woman simply stood there beneath the morning sunlight, coffee staining her blazer while the company carried on around her. Then she opened her notebook, wrote down a single observation, and continued walking deeper into the building as though the most important part of the morning had not been the coffee at all, but the reaction of everyone who had witnessed it. Jasmine Carter continued walking through the headquarters as though nothing unusual had happened. The coffee stain remained visible across the front of her blazer, a dark reminder of the encounter that had unfolded only minutes earlier in the lobby. Employees passed her in the hallways, some offering sympathetic looks while others quickly focused on their phones. A few seemed curious about why she appeared so calm. Most people in her position would have been upset. Some might have complained. Others would have demanded an apology. Jasmine did none of those things. Instead, she observed. The executive floor occupied nearly half of the building's upper levels. Glass walls separated conference rooms from open workspaces. Sunlight reflected off polished surfaces, creating a clean and modern atmosphere designed to impress clients and investors. As Jasmine moved through the corridors, she quietly studied the people around her. She noticed which managers greeted employees by name. She noticed who thanked support staff after receiving assistance. She noticed who treated receptionists with respect and who acted as though they were invisible. Every interaction mattered. Every detail told a story. Eventually, she arrived at a small employee lounge near the marketing department. The room overlooked downtown Atlanta through a wall of windows stretching from floor to ceiling. Several employees sat at tables reviewing presentations and answering emails. Conversations immediately softened when Jasmine entered wearing the stained blazer. A young employee looked up from her laptop and frowned. "Are you okay?" she asked. Jasmine smiled warmly. "I am fine. Thank you for asking." The employee hesitated before offering a package of cleaning wipes. Jasmine accepted them gratefully. "That was kind of you." The young woman smiled. "I just thought you might need them." Jasmine carefully cleaned part of the stain while studying the room around her. Nobody recognized her. Nobody knew who she was. To them, she was simply another junior employee trying to make a good impression on her first day. The experience fascinated her. For months, she had planned this visit. Officially, she had been away attending international expansion meetings and investor negotiations. Unofficially, she wanted to see the company through different eyes. She wanted to experience the culture without executive privileges, without special treatment, without anyone adjusting their behavior because the chief executive officer had entered the room. That was why she carried a visitor badge. That was why she dressed simply. That was why nobody had been informed of her arrival. The company had grown dramatically over the years. Thousands of employees now worked across multiple states. Success created opportunities. Success also created blind spots. Jasmine wanted to understand what happened inside the organization when leadership was not watching. Earlier that morning, she had received one answer in the lobby. The memory returned as she glanced down at the remaining coffee stain. Ethan Reynolds had not recognized her. More importantly, he had not believed recognition mattered. His behavior had revealed something deeper than a simple accident. It had revealed how he treated someone he assumed possessed no influence. That realization concerned her far more than the ruined blazer. A few minutes later, Jasmine thanked the employees in the lounge and continued her walk through the building. As she passed different departments, she wrote occasional notes in her small notebook. Short observations, brief impressions, moments of kindness, moments of concern. The notebook remained mostly hidden beneath her arm, but it rarely left her hand. Outside the windows, the morning sun continued rising above the city skyline. Inside the company, business moved forward as usual. Meetings began. Reports circulated. Managers gave instructions. Yet unknown to almost everyone around her, the woman quietly moving through the hallways was not an intern learning about the company. She was learning about the people trusted to lead it. By late morning, one name seemed to carry more weight than any title displayed on an office door. Ethan Reynolds. Jasmine Carter heard it repeatedly as she moved through different departments. Employees mentioned him in conference rooms, hallways, and break areas. Some spoke about him with admiration. Others spoke about him with caution. A few lowered their voices whenever his name entered a conversation. The pattern immediately caught Jasmine's attention. Influence could be measured in many ways. Sometimes it appeared through respect. Sometimes it appeared through fear. The difference mattered. Jasmine stepped into a large open workspace overlooking the downtown skyline. Rows of modern desks stretched across the floor beneath bright natural light. Teams worked on presentations, product updates, and client reports. The atmosphere seemed productive, but subtle tension lingered beneath the surface. As she passed through the department, she noticed several employees suddenly become more formal. A moment later, she understood why. Ethan Reynolds had entered the room. Conversations stopped. Postures straightened. Screens changed. Managers hurried toward him carrying status updates and project summaries. Ethan moved confidently through the workspace as though he owned every decision being made. Employees greeted him politely. He rarely acknowledged them for more than a second. Jasmine observed quietly from the edge of the room. She noticed how people reacted before Ethan even spoke. That reaction told her more than any performance review could. One project manager approached Ethan with a question regarding a delayed initiative. Before the manager could finish explaining, Ethan interrupted and redirected the conversation toward deadlines and expectations. The manager nodded repeatedly, even when it became clear she had not been allowed to finish her explanation. Moments later, Ethan moved on without asking another question. Jasmine wrote a short note in her notebook. Nearby, two employees exchanged a glance before returning to work. Neither appeared surprised. The interaction seemed routine. As the morning continued, Jasmine encountered similar examples throughout the building. Ethan's results were widely respected. His leadership style was rarely questioned. People adapted themselves around him rather than expecting him to adapt to them. Success had given him authority. Authority had gradually become certainty. And certainty, left unchecked, often created blind spots. Shortly before noon, Jasmine entered a conference room where a departmental planning session was underway. She sat quietly in the back with several junior employees. The meeting focused on upcoming operational goals. Ethan eventually joined through a video screen mounted at the front of the room. Immediately, the tone changed. Managers became more careful with their words. Questions became less frequent. Suggestions became more cautious. Jasmine watched closely. Leadership should create confidence in others. Yet many people in the room appeared more concerned with avoiding mistakes than sharing ideas. The difference was impossible to ignore. After the meeting ended, employees filed into the hallway. One young analyst accidentally dropped a folder near the conference room entrance. Papers scattered across the floor. Jasmine immediately bent down to help gather them. Several others joined her. The analyst thanked everyone repeatedly. As they stood, Ethan passed by without slowing his pace. He never noticed the employee, or perhaps he simply did not think it mattered. Jasmine looked down at the folder she had helped collect. Then she looked toward Ethan disappearing around the corner. The coffee stain remained faintly visible on her blazer. The notebook remained in her hand. The observations continued accumulating. Around her, the company appeared successful, efficient, and confident. Yet beneath the polished image, Jasmine was beginning to see a deeper story emerge. A story about leadership. A story about culture. A story about what happened when power became so comfortable that it stopped paying attention to the people standing directly in front of it. Shortly after noon, the headquarters settled into the steady rhythm that always followed the morning rush. Conference rooms filled with planning sessions. Teams gathered around screens reviewing performance metrics. The cafeteria buzzed with conversations about deadlines, promotions, and upcoming projects. Jasmine Carter continued moving through the building with quiet purpose, her notebook never far from reach. The coffee stain on her blazer had faded slightly after cleaning, but traces remained visible enough to remind her of the morning's events. She did not mind. In many ways, the stain had become useful. People revealed more about themselves when they believed someone held no authority. As she walked through the operations wing, Jasmine paused beside a glass wall overlooking a collaborative workspace. Employees worked together on presentations while managers moved between desks offering feedback. Some interactions impressed her. Others concerned her. One supervisor stopped to help a new employee understand a complicated process. Another publicly thanked a team member for solving a customer issue. Jasmine noted both examples. Strong culture deserved recognition, but not every observation carried the same warmth. Across the room, she noticed a department manager dismiss a junior employee's suggestion before allowing her to finish speaking. The employee immediately fell silent. No one challenged the interruption. Jasmine wrote another note. The pattern felt familiar. Too many people had learned to stay quiet. As the afternoon continued, she entered a small conference room that had been temporarily converted into a workspace for interns and trainees. Several young employees sat around a large table reviewing onboarding materials. They welcomed Jasmine without hesitation, assuming she was one of them. The conversation quickly turned toward career goals, company culture, and leadership opportunities. Jasmine listened carefully. Some employees spoke with excitement about their future. Others seemed hesitant when discussing senior management. One young analyst mentioned that many employees admired the company's mission but felt disconnected from some executives. Another quietly admitted that speaking honestly could sometimes feel risky. Jasmine asked thoughtful questions without revealing anything about herself. The answers she received were candid, authentic, valuable. Before leaving, she thanked the group for their honesty. A few seemed surprised that someone they believed to be another intern cared enough to listen. Later that afternoon, Jasmine passed through the executive corridor once again. There she noticed Ethan Reynolds speaking with several department heads near a conference room entrance. His voice carried easily through the hallway. Employees nearby listened attentively. Ethan appeared completely comfortable occupying the center of attention. As Jasmine approached, one of the department heads accidentally dropped a stack of reports. Papers scattered across the floor. Without hesitation, Jasmine stepped forward and helped gather them. The department head smiled gratefully. "Thank you." Jasmine handed over the documents and wished him a good afternoon. Ethan observed the interaction briefly before looking at her visitor badge. Recognition did not appear in his eyes. Neither did appreciation. Instead, his expression carried the same dismissive certainty she had seen earlier in the lobby. To him, she remained invisible. Another temporary face moving through the building. Another person beneath his attention. Jasmine said nothing. She simply wrote another observation after continuing down the hallway. The notebook was beginning to fill. Every page captured moments large and small. Acts of respect. Acts of indifference. Examples of leadership. Examples of failure. The building itself seemed almost unaware that it was being evaluated. Outside the windows, sunlight reflected from neighboring towers as clouds drifted slowly above the city skyline. Inside, business continued as usual. Meetings advanced. Emails circulated. Deadlines approached. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet audit was taking place. Not of finances, not of performance metrics, of character. And with every passing hour, Jasmine was learning exactly who people chose to become when they believed nobody important was watching. By mid-afternoon, the headquarters felt different. The energy remained busy, but beneath the steady movement of meetings and deadlines, an invisible tension had begun to spread. Jasmine Carter sensed it as she moved through the building. Employees who had seen the incident in the lobby earlier that morning were still talking about it in quiet conversations. Most focused on the coffee spill. Some focused on Ethan Reynolds' reaction afterward. None of them knew the full story. Jasmine carried her notebook beneath her arm and continued observing. The coffee stain on her blazer had become lighter, but traces still remained. She could have changed clothes hours ago. Instead, she chose not to. The stain reminded her of something important. Small moments often revealed the largest truths. Near 3 o'clock, she entered a gathering area outside one of the executive conference rooms. Several managers and department heads stood nearby waiting for an operations review meeting to begin. Conversations drifted between budget forecasts, staffing plans, and quarterly goals. Jasmine quietly took a seat near the back of the room, blending easily into the background. Most people assumed she was there to observe and learn. In a way, she was. A few minutes later, Ethan arrived. The atmosphere shifted immediately. People straightened their posture. Conversations paused. Several managers quickly reviewed their notes. Ethan walked through the room with the same confidence he had displayed throughout the day. His reputation seemed to enter the room before he did. As he passed Jasmine, he briefly glanced toward her visitor badge. Recognition never appeared. Instead, he frowned slightly as though wondering why an intern occupied space near an executive meeting. He stopped a few feet away and looked toward one of the managers standing nearby. "We really need to be more selective about who sits in these sessions," he said casually. The comment was not loud, but it was loud enough. Several people heard it immediately. The room grew noticeably quieter. Jasmine remained seated. Ethan continued speaking. "People should earn access before they start acting like they belong here." A few uncomfortable glances moved around the room. Nobody responded. Nobody challenged him. The silence felt familiar. Jasmine looked up calmly. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Ethan seemed completely certain of himself, completely certain of his assumptions, completely certain that the young black woman sitting quietly before him possessed no influence whatsoever. Jasmine simply offered a polite smile. Nothing more. Ethan turned away and began discussing meeting objectives with several department heads. Around the room, tension lingered. One manager looked as though he wanted to apologize on Ethan's behalf. Another avoided eye contact entirely. A young analyst sitting nearby glanced toward Jasmine with visible discomfort. Yet Jasmine remained composed. She opened her notebook and wrote another observation. The action itself seemed insignificant, but several employees noticed it. They had seen her writing notes throughout the day. Some assumed she was documenting her internship experience. Others wondered if she was preparing a report. Nobody knew the truth. The meeting eventually began, and Jasmine quietly listened from the back of the room. As executives discussed performance metrics and operational priorities, she found herself paying less attention to the numbers and more attention to the people presenting them. Numbers explained results. Behavior explained culture. And culture always determined the future. Outside the conference room windows, afternoon sunlight reflected against neighboring buildings. Long shadows stretched across the city below. Inside, Ethan continued leading discussions with complete confidence. He appeared untouchable, respected, influential. Yet with every assumption he made, every dismissive comment he delivered, and every opportunity for humility he ignored, he was unknowingly writing a very different evaluation than the one he believed was taking place. And before the day ended, that evaluation would finally be revealed. As the afternoon slowly drifted toward evening, the pace inside Carter Technologies began to change. Meetings concluded. Employees returned to their desks to finish reports before the end of the day. The bright energy of morning softened into something quieter. Sunlight stretched across the glass walls of the headquarters, casting long golden reflections across floors that had carried thousands of footsteps since sunrise. Jasmine Carter finally stepped away from the constant movement of the building and entered a small executive lounge rarely used during business hours. The room overlooked the city from nearly 40 stories above the streets below. Through the windows, Atlanta glowed beneath the late afternoon sun. Traffic moved like streams of light between buildings. Far beyond the skyline, clouds drifted slowly across the horizon. For the first time all day, Jasmine sat alone. The silence felt welcome. She placed her notebook on a nearby table and removed her blazer. The faint coffee stain remained visible. Looking at it now, she found herself smiling slightly. Not because of the incident itself, because of everything it had revealed afterward. She carefully folded the blazer and rested it beside her. The room remained still except for the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system. Jasmine stood before the window and looked out across the city she had spent years helping to shape through innovation, risk, and persistence. Few people inside the company knew how difficult the beginning had been. They saw the headquarters, the success, the awards displayed in reception areas. They saw quarterly growth reports and media interviews. They saw the outcome. Very few remembered the beginning. Jasmine did. She remembered a small rented garage on the edge of the city. She remembered folding tables, borrowed computers, and long nights spent solving problems with a team of only 3 people. She remembered answering customer support emails herself because there was nobody else available. She remembered the uncertainty, the sacrifices, the years when success felt impossibly far away. Most of all, she remembered the culture she wanted to build. A company where people felt respected regardless of job title. A company where character mattered as much as performance. A company where leadership meant service rather than status. Those values had guided every major decision she had made. Standing before the window now, she wondered how much of that culture had survived the company's growth. Throughout the day, she had seen encouraging examples. Employees helping one another. Managers showing kindness. Teams collaborating with genuine respect. Yet she had also seen something else. Small moments of arrogance. Assumptions. Indifference. Behaviors that often emerged when success remained unchecked for too long. Her eyes drifted toward the notebook resting on the table. Every page contained observations gathered throughout the day. None were dramatic. None were exaggerated. Together, however, they painted a remarkably clear picture. The truth rarely appeared through a single event. It emerged through patterns. Jasmine understood that better than anyone. Outside, the sun continued descending toward the horizon. Warm light reflected across nearby skyscrapers, turning entire walls of glass into sheets of gold. The city seemed calmer from this height, smaller somehow. For several minutes, she simply watched the changing colors and listened to the silence. Then her phone vibrated softly on the table. A single message appeared on the screen. The company-wide leadership gathering would begin in less than 1 hour. Everything was ready. Jasmine read the message twice before setting the phone down. There was no excitement in her expression, no anger, no anticipation of revenge, only clarity. The day had provided exactly what she came to find. Answers. As the final rays of sunlight touched the skyline, she picked up her notebook, slipped on her blazer once more, and quietly left the room. Behind her, the city continued glowing beneath the evening sky. Ahead of her, a room full of employees waited for a meeting that would soon change far more than they realized. At 5 o'clock sharp, employees from every department began gathering inside the company's largest auditorium. The space occupied an entire floor of the headquarters and could accommodate hundreds of people. Large screens illuminated the stage. Rows of seats gradually filled with managers, analysts, engineers, support staff, and executives. Conversations echoed through the room as people settled into place. Most assumed they were attending a routine leadership presentation. Nobody realized they were about to witness something entirely different. Ethan Reynolds entered through a side aisle accompanied by several senior managers. As always, people acknowledged him as he passed. He nodded politely and took a seat near the front. His confidence remained untouched. The day had unfolded exactly as he expected. Meetings had concluded. Reports had been reviewed. Goals had been discussed. From his perspective, everything remained under control. Across the auditorium, employees continued filing into seats. Some recognized the young woman with the faint coffee stain still visible on her blazer. She quietly entered through a rear doorway carrying the same notebook she had held all day. A few employees from earlier encounters offered friendly smiles. One analyst waved discreetly. A receptionist from the lobby recognized her immediately. Several interns assumed she had somehow received permission to attend the event. Nobody questioned it. Jasmine simply took a seat near the side of the room and waited. Minutes later, the lights dimmed slightly. Conversations faded. The massive screens behind the stage illuminated with the company logo. A senior executive stepped onto the platform and welcomed everyone. Employees applauded politely. The executive thanked teams for their hard work, acknowledged recent company achievements, and spoke briefly about the organization's future. The presentation felt familiar, comfortable, predictable. Then the executive smiled and glanced toward the wings of the stage. "Today," he said, "we are honored to welcome back the person whose vision created everything you see around you." Applause immediately began spreading through the auditorium. Ethan joined in without hesitation. The founder's return had been discussed for weeks. Many employees had never seen the chief executive officer in person. Excitement moved through the room. The executive continued. "Please welcome our founder and chief executive officer, Jasmine Carter." For a brief second, nothing happened. Then movement appeared near the side aisle. Jasmine stood. The notebook remained in her hand. The same blazer remained on her shoulders. The same woman who had spent the entire day walking unnoticed through the building began moving toward the stage. Silence arrived before understanding did. One by one, employees recognized her. Expressions changed instantly. The receptionist covered her mouth. Several managers stared in disbelief. Interns exchanged stunned looks. The analyst from the conference room nearly dropped her notebook. Across the auditorium, realization spread like a wave. Jasmine calmly walked toward the stage beneath hundreds of eyes. No dramatic music played. No announcement repeated itself. The truth alone was powerful enough. Ethan remained frozen in his seat. At first, confusion crossed his face. Then recognition. Then something far heavier. Memory connected itself piece by piece. The lobby. The coffee. The comments. The assumptions. Every moment returned at once. Around him, executives slowly turned their attention toward the stage. Jasmine climbed the steps and accepted the applause with quiet gratitude. The standing ovation continued longer than expected. When it finally softened, she approached the podium and looked across the audience. Her expression remained calm, professional, unchanged, the same composure she had carried throughout the day. Looking out across the employees, she smiled warmly. Then her eyes briefly passed over Ethan Reynolds seated near the front. She said nothing about the morning, nothing about the coffee, nothing about herself. Yet in that single moment, everyone in the auditorium understood exactly what had happened. And for the first time all day, Ethan Reynolds realized the person he had dismissed as insignificant had been the most important person in the building all along. The auditorium remained silent for several seconds after Jasmine Carter took her place behind the podium. Hundreds of employees watched her. Some were still trying to process what they had just witnessed. Others sat completely still, replaying moments from earlier in the day. The woman many had assumed was a temporary intern now stood beneath the company logo as founder and chief executive officer. Yet Jasmine showed no sign of satisfaction, no hint of triumph. Her expression remained calm and focused. She thanked everyone for attending before speaking about the company itself. She spoke about innovation, responsibility, and trust. She spoke about the values that had guided the organization since its earliest days. Every word felt measured, genuine. Employees listened carefully. The room seemed connected by a single shared attention. After discussing company performance and future goals, Jasmine paused briefly. Then her tone shifted slightly. "Today," she said, "I spent the entire day inside this building without introducing myself." A ripple of curiosity moved through the audience. Jasmine continued, "I wanted to observe something that cannot be measured through quarterly reports. I wanted to observe culture." Complete silence followed. Across the auditorium, managers exchanged uncertain looks. Several executives sat straighter in their seats. Ethan Reynolds remained motionless near the front row. Jasmine spoke calmly about the importance of treating people with respect regardless of position, title, or perceived influence. She described moments of kindness she had witnessed throughout the day. Employees helping coworkers, managers supporting team members, individuals demonstrating leadership through simple acts of consideration. As she shared those examples, smiles appeared throughout the room. Then she spoke about a different set of observations. Not with anger, not with accusation, with honesty. She described moments where people had been ignored, moments where assumptions replaced understanding, moments where authority had been mistaken for leadership. Nobody needed specific names. The message was clear. Jasmine then opened the notebook she had carried throughout the day. The same notebook employees had seen in hallways, conference rooms, and break areas. She explained that every observation had been recorded because culture always revealed itself through behavior. Not slogans, not mission statements. Behavior. The room remained completely focused on her words. Finally, Jasmine looked toward the executive section. "Leadership positions carry responsibility," she said. "When leaders repeatedly fail to demonstrate the values of this company, accountability becomes necessary." The statement settled heavily across the auditorium. A senior member of the human resources team stepped onto the stage carrying a folder. Several executives immediately understood what was happening. Jasmine announced a series of leadership changes based on a comprehensive review that had been underway long before her visit. The observations from that day had confirmed concerns already documented through employee feedback and internal evaluations. Several management positions would transition to new leadership. Additional cultural accountability measures would be introduced. Then came the final announcement. Ethan Reynolds' role as Senior Operations Director would conclude effective immediately. The room became silent once again. Ethan sat perfectly still. No dramatic reaction followed. No argument. No confrontation. The decision had not emerged from a single incident. It had emerged from a pattern now impossible to ignore. Jasmine never mentioned the coffee. She never described their encounter. She never embarrassed him publicly. Instead, she focused entirely on leadership standards and organizational values. The distinction mattered. This was not revenge. This was accountability. Around the auditorium, employees slowly began understanding the difference. Jasmine closed her notebook and thanked everyone for their dedication to the company. Then she offered a final reminder. Every interaction mattered. Every conversation mattered. Every person mattered. As applause gradually filled the room, employees rose to their feet. Some looked inspired. Others looked thoughtful. Near the front row, Ethan remained seated for a moment longer, staring quietly toward the stage. For the first time all day, he appeared to understand that the most important lesson had never been about authority. It had been about character. The applause gradually faded as employees began leaving the auditorium. Conversations filled the aisles. Some people discussed the leadership changes. Others talked about the company culture speech. Many were still trying to process the revelation that the quiet woman they had seen throughout the building was the founder and chief executive officer herself. Yet as the crowd slowly dispersed, Jasmine Carter remained on the stage for a few moments longer. The large screens behind her now displayed only the company logo glowing softly against a dark background. Around the room, staff members gathered their belongings and headed toward elevators. Evening had settled across the city beyond the glass walls of the headquarters. The golden light of afternoon had given way to the first glow of office towers and streetlights. Jasmine looked out across the nearly empty auditorium and felt a quiet sense of clarity. She had not come searching for mistakes. She had come searching for truth, and truth had revealed itself. Eventually, she stepped down from the stage and walked through a side corridor leading back toward the main lobby. The building felt different now, quieter, slower. Many employees had already left for the evening. Those who remained moved through the hallways with a calm, reflective energy. Several stopped to thank Jasmine as she passed. Some thanked her for her leadership. Others thanked her for listening. A few simply smiled. Jasmine returned every greeting with the same warmth she had shown throughout the day. Near the reception area, she noticed the young receptionist who had witnessed the morning incident. The woman looked slightly nervous as Jasmine approached. "I just wanted to say thank you," the receptionist said softly, "for everything you said today." Jasmine smiled. "Thank you for being kind when it mattered." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. She understood immediately. Of all the observations recorded that day, Jasmine had remembered hers. The two exchanged a final smile before Jasmine continued toward the entrance. The lobby was almost empty now. Sunlight no longer filled the space. Instead, soft interior lighting reflected across the polished marble floor. Jasmine slowed her pace as she approached the exact spot where the morning had begun. The place where coffee had splashed across her blazer. The place where assumptions had revealed character. For a moment, she simply stood there. Not because she was reliving the incident, because she was appreciating the lesson it had offered. Throughout her career, people had often assumed leadership was about authority, about titles, about influence. Yet the most important leadership lessons almost always emerged from ordinary moments. A conversation, a choice, a gesture, a response. Character revealed itself when nobody expected consequences. Across the lobby, elevator doors opened quietly. Employees stepped out and headed toward the parking garage. The rhythm of the building continued. Life moved forward. Jasmine glanced once more at the company logo stretching across the stone wall near reception. Years earlier, that logo had existed only as an idea sketched on a piece of paper. Now it represented thousands of careers, families, and opportunities. Protecting that culture mattered more than protecting any individual position. Outside the glass entrance, the city shimmered beneath the evening sky. Jasmine stepped through the doors and felt the cool air of the approaching night. Behind her, the headquarters stood illuminated against the skyline. Inside, meetings would continue. Projects would move forward. New leaders would emerge. Yet the lesson of that day would remain far longer than any organizational change. Respect should never depend on job titles. Kindness should never require recognition. And true leadership begins with how people treat those they believe have nothing to offer them. Jasmine walked toward the city lights without looking back. Behind her, the building stood quietly beneath the night sky, and in that silence, the culture she had worked so hard to build finally felt a little stronger.